I'm 32 years old, an age when, they say, life is just beginning. But on the day that number 32 firmly established itself in my biography, life seemed not only not to be starting, but also to be hurtling downhill. Edward, my husband, had promised a modest celebration with family. "Nothing special, darling, just a quiet family dinner," he said in the morning, kissing my cheek. His eyes, usually radiant and full of warmth, seemed somehow distant today, but I didn't pay attention. Who knows, maybe he's just tired, I thought, immersing myself in the routine of work. The evening came quickly, as it always does when you're looking forward to something pleasant. I returned home, anticipating a cozy evening with loved ones. But already in the hallway, I was struck by an unnatural silence. Usually, the house was filled with laughter and voices, especially when Edward's family gathered. Today, however, there was an ominous, tense quiet. When I entered the dining room, it was as if I'd been struck by lightning. The table was set with a strange, frightening solemnity. A snow-white tablecloth, sparkling crystal glasses, cutlery arranged with maniacal precision. In the center of the table, like a sinister accent, stood a vase with snow-white lilies, flowers that I had always considered a symbol of mourning, not celebration. Edward stood at the head of the table, like a judge ready to deliver a verdict. In his hands he held a stack of papers. His face was stone, like a mask hiding a storm of, "What? Malice?" Next to him on either side of the table sat his parents, Patricia and Richard, and his brother, Daniel. Self-satisfied smirks played on their faces, sending an unpleasant chill down my spine. They looked at me like predators at cornered prey. "Happy birthday, Jane," Edward said, and his voice sounded sharp and unnatural, like a knife blade sliding across glass. The sarcasm in his tone was so obvious that it pierced me like an arrow. "I have a surprise for you." With these words, he forcefully threw the stack of papers onto the table. A faint crack echoed through the room, like a harbinger of trouble. The papers scattered across the snow-white tablecloth, like white flags of surrender. I instinctively glanced at them and froze, petrified. Divorce papers. The word divorce pulsed before my eyes like a sinister inscription on a wall. "We're divorcing you, you worthless failure," Edward spat out, and his words, like spittle, hit me in the face. I couldn't believe my ears. Failure? Is that what he calls me? The woman who loved him more than life, who was ready to do anything for him. An explosion of laughter erupted in the room. Patricia, Richard, and Daniel laughed loudly, maliciously, as if reveling in my humiliation. Patricia raised a glass of champagne as if making a toast. "We never thought he would marry someone like you," she exclaimed, and contempt rang in her voice. The world around me seemed to turn upside down. I stood there, stunned, as if punched in the gut. A vacuum formed in my head, as if all thoughts had vanished at once. I looked at Edward, at his family, at the divorce papers, and couldn't believe that this was really happening. This is some kind of nightmare, I thought. Asterisk, I'll wake up now, and it will all disappear. Asterisk. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was reality, cruel and merciless. A reality that Edward and his family had created. A reality that shattered my life in an instant. Without saying a word, I took a pen from the table, signed the divorce papers, returned them to Edward, and left the room. I didn't want to see their gloating faces anymore, didn't want to hear their mocking laughter. I just wanted to get as far away as possible from this place, from these people, from this nightmare. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had humiliated me completely. They thought I would crumble and fall to my knees. But they had no idea what I was capable of. They didn't know that deep down I had already begun to make plans for revenge. Plans that would change everything. The year that followed that terrible birthday became a year of transformation. A year of pain, disappointment, but also a year of incredible inner strength and rebirth. I immersed myself in work with maniacal persistence, as if trying to drown the pain in a sea of code and algorithms. The revolutionary application that I had been developing for several years became my obsession, my only goal. I worked day and night, forgetting about sleep and food. My small office became my fortress, my refuge from pain and disappointment. Liters of coffee, takeout pizza, the light of the monitor reflected in tired eyes. That was my whole life during that period, but I didn't complain. Work gave me solace, gave me a sense of control over my life, which I had lost on that fateful birthday. The application I was working on was an ambitious project. It was a new generation personal organizer that was supposed to change people's perception of productivity and time management. I put all my knowledge, all my strength, all my soul into it, and it paid off. A year later, the Time Master application took off. First, a few small tech blogs wrote about it, then major online publications picked it up. Soon, I was invited to a prestigious technology conference in San Francisco. My presentation caused a sensation. Investors lined up, offering generous investments. In a few months, my company became worth millions. I was at the peak of success. I was featured on the covers of technology magazines, invited to television shows, interviewed by leading business publications. My name became synonymous with innovation and success. My fortune grew by leaps and bounds. I bought myself a beautiful house with an ocean view, an expensive car, started dressing in the best boutiques. Life was getting better. No, life became better than ever. But Edward knew nothing about it. He lived in his little world, confident that he had broken me, that I was leading a miserable existence as a failure. He had no idea that I had become who I had always dreamed of being: successful, rich, influential. Everything changed one fine day when he accidentally saw me on television. I was giving a live interview talking about my success, about my application, about my plans for the future. Edward watched me, mouth agape, not believing his eyes. The woman on the screen, confident, stylish, successful, is that the same Jane he had dumped a year ago? Impossible. But it was me. And it was just the beginning. That same evening, my phone literally exploded with messages. Unknown numbers, congratulations, offers of cooperation. Amidst this chaos, I noticed a familiar number, Edward's number. At first, I wanted to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message. "Jane, I saw you on television. Is that you? It can't be. Please call me. We need to talk." I smirked. Talk? About what? About how he humiliated me on my birthday. About how his family laughed at my pain. About how he called me a worthless failure. No, thank you. I have nothing to talk to him about. I ignored the message and blocked his number, but Edward didn't give up. The next day, messages started coming from other numbers. "Jane, it's Edward. Please don't ignore me. I know I acted terribly. I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Jane, I never stopped loving you for a second. I was stupid, blind. Give me a chance to fix everything. Jane, please, at least listen to me. I want to explain why I did that." I read these messages with cold indifference. His words didn't touch me. His regrets seemed false, contrived. He just wanted to come back to the successful, rich Jane. He didn't need me myself. He needed my money, my status, my new life. I continued to ignore his messages, but Edward did not retreat. He started coming to my house. At first, he just rang the doorbell, begging to talk. I didn't open it. Then he started waiting for me near the office. I pretended not to notice him. His desperate attempts to get me back were starting to irritate me. One evening, returning home, I saw a car parked opposite my house. Edward was sitting inside. He was asleep, his head resting on the steering wheel. It was cold outside. The end of autumn was already felt in the cool wind. I walked up to the car and knocked on the window. Edward woke up, startled, and looked at me with frightened eyes. Seeing me, his face lit up. He jumped out of the car and rushed to me, like a lifeline. "Jane, please," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "I'll do anything you want. Just give me one more chance." I looked at him coldly, indifferently. Inside me, there was not a drop of sympathy, not a drop of pity, only ice. "You had a chance, Edward, you threw it away." "I made a mistake," he cried, choking on tears. "I've changed. I realized what I lost." "You didn't lose anything, you threw it away, and now it's gone." He reached out to me, trying to take my hand, but I sharply pulled my hand away. "Goodbye, Edward." I turned around and walked towards the house, leaving him standing in the street, in tears and despair. I felt like a winner. I had taken revenge on him. I had shown him what I was really worth. But for some reason, there was no joy inside, only emptiness. Edward's despair quickly turned into anger. A rejected man is a terrible force. He began to spread dirty rumors about me, trying to discredit me in the eyes of the public. He told everyone that I was a domestic tyrant, that I cheated on him right and left, that I stole money from him. His lies were absurd and ridiculous, but he persistently spread them, like a virus. At first, I didn't pay attention to it, thinking it would pass by itself, but the rumors spread like wildfire. My reputation began to suffer. Investors started asking questions. Partners began to doubt. I had to hire a lawyer to deal with this dirty stream of lies. Lawsuits, rebuttals in the press, public statements. All this took time, energy, and nerves. The stress was enormous. I had achieved everything I dreamed of. I had money, fame, success, but I was unhappy. Some oppressive emptiness was growing inside me which nothing could fill. Work no longer brought the same satisfaction. Parties and social events seemed meaningless and empty. The expensive house and luxury car brought no joy. I felt lonely and lost, despite the crowds of admirers and partners surrounding me. I started drinking, first in the evenings to relieve stress, then more and more often to drown out the inner pain. Alcohol gave temporary relief, but then it only got worse. The emptiness became even deeper, the despair even stronger. I was turning into a shadow of myself, a successful businesswoman in public, a broken and unhappy person in my soul. I had lost myself. I had lost the joy of life. I had lost everything I once lived for. And all this because of revenge, because of hatred, because of the desire to prove to Edward that I was worth something. But was it worth it? In the end, who did I prove anything to? Edward? His family? Myself? And what did I win in the end? Nothing. Only pain and disappointment. One night, as I sat at home, drowning myself in alcoholic oblivion, the doorbell rang. I struggled to get up and open the door. Edward stood on the threshold. He was pale, exhausted, trembling all over. Tears and despair stood in his eyes. "Jane, I'm sick," he whispered, barely audibly. "Very sick. The doctors say not much time left." It was as if ice water had been poured over me. Sick? Terminally ill? Edward, who was so strong, so healthy, so cruel? He told me about the diagnosis, about the late stages of the disease, about how the doctors gave him only months to live. His voice trembled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He asked for forgiveness for everything he had done, for the pain he had caused. He said that only now did he realize how much he loved me, how stupid he had been to succumb to his family's influence. I listened to him, not saying a word. Contradictory feelings fought within me. Pity, compassion, anger, resentment, everything mixed into some unimaginable tangle. I looked at this broken, dying man and couldn't understand what I felt. "Jane, please, forgive me," he whispered, falling to his knees. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I beg you." I was silent. I looked down at him, like a queen looking at a defeated enemy. The power I had longed for so long was in my hands. I could humiliate him, trample him, refuse forgiveness, and he would get what he deserved. But at that moment, looking into his despairing eyes, I suddenly realized that revenge had brought me nothing but emptiness and pain, that hatred only poisons the soul, that true strength is in forgiveness. I knelt down next to him, took his face in my hands, and wiped away his tears. "I forgive you, Edward," I said quietly but firmly. "I forgive you." Gratitude flashed in his eyes. He hugged me tightly, like a drowning man clinging to a lifeline, and at that moment I felt the ice in my heart begin to melt. How the emptiness was filled with warmth and light, how my soul found peace. We spent the last months of Edward's life together. I cared for him, supported him, was there until the very end. His family, learning about his illness and our reconciliation, retreated. They no longer dared to interfere in our lives. When Edward died, I was there, holding his hand. His last words were filled with gratitude and love, and at that moment I realized that by forgiving him, I had forgiven myself. I had freed myself from the burden of hatred and revenge that had weighed down my soul for so long. A year has passed. I stood at Edward's grave, holding a bouquet of white lilies in my hand, the same lilies that stood on the table on that fateful birthday. Now they seem to me a symbol not of mourning, but of forgiveness and a new beginning. I laid the flowers on Edward's grave and slowly walked away, dragging my feet. A slight sadness lay on my heart, but there was no longer the heavy weight of regret and guilt. I had lost a lot, but in the end, I had gained something much more valuable, the ability to forgive and love, and that was the most important victory of all.